We continue to bring you all the updates here on News 9 in the last couple of hours. A lot has transpired by the way of the first inaugural session where Prime Minister stood up, spoke for the very first time, addressing all G20 nations, their representatives. He started with offering his condolences to the people who've died as a result of a massive earthquake in Morocco. 600 people are dead as of now. Let's quickly dip into what Prime Minister said before we start.
G20 के प्रेसिडेंट के तौर पर भारत पूरी दुनिया का आह्वान करता है कि हम मिलकर सबसे पहले इस ग्लोबल ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट को एक विश्वास, एक भरोसे में बदलें। यह हम सभी के साथ मिलकर चलने का समय है और इसलिए सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास का मंत्र हम सभी के लिए एक पथ प्रदर्शक बन सकता है। वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था में उथल-पुथल हो, नॉर्थ और साउथ का डिवाइड हो, ईस्ट और वेस्ट की दूरी हो, फूड, फ्यूल और फर्टिलाइजर का मैनेजमेंट हो, टेररिज्म और साइबर सिक्योरिटी हो, हेल्थ, एनर्जी और वाटर सिक्योरिटी हो, वर्तमान के साथ ही आने वाली पीढ़ियों के लिए हमें इन चुनौतियों के ठोस समाधान की तरफ बढ़ना ही होगा।
All right, those of course were bites of Prime Minister Modi speaking at the inaugural session of the G20 Summit. He touched on a host of issues, but more importantly talked about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. That's a new slogan coming in there from G20 at this point. Let's quickly dip into this conversation further. With me in the studio are my colleagues Rakesh, Khar and Kartik Malhotra. Thank you very much for being with us here, Rakesh. I want to first begin by asking you, we've been discussing this. The day is finally here. Not a lot coming out of what's happening inside the closed doors, but I think the ball has now been set into motion by Prime Minister.
Absolutely, Shweta. Thank you. First and foremost, I think the addition of African, Nations Union, that's a big outcome already on the table. And Prime Minister used the speech early morning to formalize the entry of that particular bloc, making it G21. So I think that's a big outcome. But obviously, the discussions are on. The first session was on Earth. The second one is, the planet, I guess. And then finally, in the evening, there is going to be some amount of communication on what exactly happened during the day. Both these sessions are off camera, so in that sense, Prime Minister's speech is being televised as it is expectedly. And you rightly mentioned that he has mainstreamed this particular slogan and transitioned it from, or pivoted it importantly from the domestic constituency to the international constituency. I think the trust deficit that he repeatedly talked about is as an area where I think India can play a huge role, bridging the gap between north and south, east and west, and within blocks that exist today. I think there's a huge headroom that India has in terms of its ability to persuade people to come on a table and discuss ideas frankly and fearlessly.
All right, and while we wait for more details to come out, people are anticipating a lot more. They've been out on Twitter, out on social media, discussing, debating what could be the likely outcome. But in a sense, there is some sort of hope. There is commitment that has been made by the government, by various governments, of course, to what can be achieved. My colleague Krishnakumar walking into the studio at this point and perhaps will run us through what is the chatter on social media. How are people feeling it? How are they taking it? There is a sense of excitement which is palpable, Krishna.
Absolutely. I can't take my eyes off the top India trends on X, formerly known as Twitter. Top trending hashtag for the past many hours since daybreak is hashtag G20 India 2023. And we've got that over here, hashtag G20 India 2023. These are the other ones that are trending. Hashtag G20 Bharat, because all that news about Prime Minister Modi's name placard at the G20 being called Bharat and not India. So has the process already begun? Lots of chatter about that. So hashtag G20 Bharat, hashtag G20 agenda clearly since morning. And then there is I-20 Summit Delhi. These are, and look at the way, look at the refresh rate for some of these hashtags over here. They're just flying. Because that's top of mind for so many people from India, top trending in India. Well, look, I'm a movie fan. I know when a big movie releases on that day, top trending is that movie. And today, this looks like the movie of the day. Definitely is the G20 Summit. Huge discussion whether you're interested in geopolitics or not, global politics or not. India is hosting the G20 presidency, and that being lapped up, resonating, reverberating on x.com. So that's what we've got over here. And that's because, Shweta, the updates are fantastic. Look at the photographs of all the global heads. That's being tweeted, retweeted. Let's get some visuals in on that note of some of the big people who can have a significant economic impact, as part of this G20 summit. Because bear in mind, we always keep discussing the economic relevance of G20, and to that effect, apart from all the big global leaders, from Joe Biden to Olaf Scholz, who have made it. There you have Ajay Banga, former chief of MasterCard of Indian origin, pride of India, now head of the World Bank, walking in. What a moment that was when India is hosting the G20 presidency. This is certainly a moment of pride for India. It's come a full circle. A global Indian coming back to India for its moment in the sun. There's Kristalina Georgieva, who is the chief of the IMF, also making her way over here. Strangely, this is a G20 summit where the multilateral development bank reforms are going to be seriously discussed. Yet, IMF too making its presence felt, and Shweta, as you're talking about visuals of her dancing, have gone absolutely viral in that pre-G20 summit celebration that took place. A very happy, cordial handshake, friendly even, they're bantering for those few seconds.
All right, I'll just have to quickly interrupt you, Krishna. We have visuals of French President Emmanuel Macron, who's just landed in Delhi. Let's cut to those visuals. All right, I think he's already been received. He will be headed straight to the venue. So yet another addition to the long list of people who we're discussing.
What an economy like France. I mean, old trade partners, France and Germany. I was just wondering, we saw Olaf Scholz in the morning. I was wondering, where is President Emmanuel Macron? Finally, he's here, joining in the party, the G20 Summit party here in India. So fantastic. We're also showing, just before this, if we can bring that visual back of Ursula von der Leyen, who was there, who also came in the morning. Ursula von der Leyen, the chair of the European Commission. We're talking about technology a lot. European Commission versus big tech is a big story. So Ursula von der Leyen making it. So, these people, Ajay Banga, Ursula von der Leyen, Kristalina Georgieva, all these people are indicators of the economic significance of G20, from World Bank to IMF, the chiefs being over here. So Shweta, so this is the sort of party starter, if I may.
Okay.
So all the talks and the deliberations are going to take place as we speak, and then of course all eyes on that final communique. And if India can pull a rabbit out of the hat in these extremely polarized, divided times for the G20 summit, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that India will pull out a better G20 summit than any other country, Shweta.
All right. Will there be a final New Delhi communique? We don't know. But I think a big headline that's also come out, and Kartik, a big headline that you've been in fact tracking is by the way of strengthening India-US ties. They've strengthened like never before. And we saw that big hug between both the President of United States and Indian Prime Minister. He was received for a private dinner by the Prime Minister at his home. There was a series of discussion, a bilateral talk between the two countries, and this morning received at the pavilion by Prime Minister again. A lot has happened in the last 12 hours.
A lot has happened in the last 12 hours, Shweta, and a lot has happened actually over the course of the last few months. Ever since, I think, Prime Minister Modi in the month of June traveling to the US and really bagging a lot of technology-driven contracts back for investment in India. And add to that, I think news that is coming in today is this new act which is being introduced in the Congress in the US, where export of electronic components, export of IT, export of technology to India is actually going to be strengthened even further. And this act, incidentally, is introduced and hopefully will get passed, where India gets elevated from the tier 3 stable of exports for the US and really climb the ladder up, where it becomes imperative and easier for a trade of technology to happen between the two countries. So I think that's a significant milestone which is happening on the sidelines of the G20. But let's come back to what we really have on the table. In the month of June, we already had Micron and we had Applied Materials, both semiconductor players and strong names in the space of semiconductor manufacturing, and Applied Materials also into electronic components outside of semiconductors, inking deals about manufacturing in India. Now, cut to G20, and the precursor to G20, you also have NVIDIA, and NVIDIA partnering with two of the largest technology players here in India, Reliance Jio, as well as Tata Communications. So it's and all these semiconductor, artificial intelligence based deals are coming at a time when China is being sidelined on purpose, cornered, sidelined on purpose, because it is not in the interest of the United States of America to let China gain access to proprietary technology that US has developed. And NVIDIA pretty much banned from exporting its semiconductor fabs to China or even sharing technology with China. Add to that China's absence from G20, and India and US now closer than ever before. The handshakes and the hugs and all the trade, stitching the same story, weaving the same story together. That these are the best of times for India and US. And what is really bridging this India-US tie right now is technology, and this technology is not limited only to semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Incidentally, you have two more companies also that have signed almost cumulatively $700 million worth of investments, which are likely to happen in India. But coming back to what is stitching these trades together or these ties together, in addition to semiconductors and artificial intelligence, is defense. And you have the Hunter drones, you have the GE engines, which will go into India's indigenously developed Tejas aircrafts made by HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. And all these ties really coming together at a time when both nations are heading into an election year next year. And both countries have their own quarrels with China, and China being very conveniently absent from G20. So I think there are a lot of, there's a lot to read between the lines here by way of India and US strengthening their ties, India and US for their respective reasons falling out of their relationships with China on trade, on technology transfer, on import-export curbs. So I think a lot happening in the geo-economic order, perhaps which is very closely linked to the geopolitical order.
All right, and before I bring Krishna back on what, the high-tech export curbs that have been lifted, which essentially means the US will now be looking at transferring more tech and technology into India, what that new bill or act will envisage. Before I get to that, let me also bring this question up to you. And as we decode this process of, bilateral talks on the sidelines, one of the questions that a lot of naysayers will have is that it is a multilateral platform. While it's important for India and India's interest to have conversations on the sideline, China's absence and India's growing, friendship with the US, especially on tech, where China is banned, how is that likely to play up on the global platform?
Well, right from day one, we expected, bilaterals also to shine light during the G20 discussions. So I don't think it's out of sync. While as the focus is on G20, the multilateral forum, where we got African Union as G21. But, these 2 days or these 48 hours are going to be key pivots in terms of bringing about independent relationships between various countries. And I think Kartik is absolutely right. India has really, so to say, raised the bar in relationships with US. And my own view is that there is a durability in the relationship which is, in a way, which is devoid of any government there or here. I think even if there is a government change, whereas there may be some tweaking here and there, but the fact of the matter is that over the last 2 decades, it all began with Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister, who laid the foundation for a new era in India-US relationships. From thereafter, Vajpayee of course did his bit, but thereafter, there's been a consistent growth in the relationships between the two countries. See, defense was one very, very important area where India didn't look up to US. So all that is now, the menu in relationship between India and US is complete now, with India really, really going big on, defense deals with US. And you talked about multilateral forums. I think it's important also to point out that, we should love China for bringing India together, and also leading to two parallel platforms happening, I2, U2, India, Israel, USA and UAE. So that's a big ticket idea that's happening. It's supposed to be the new Quad, and it's economics at the heart of it, and obviously geopolitics follows. And as G20 star attraction by the end of the day, I guess, I don't have full details, but I think we will have a big ticket railway project being announced as part of a slightly tweaked to ITU2 formation, which is India, Saudi Arab and United Arab, UAE and US, where there is a new transport railway project being talked about going through the length and breadth of these countries.
Right.
Not to US, but US driving this initiative with India. So Saudi Arabia, UAE and India and US. That announcement, I guess, is going to happen by the end of the day. And independent of that, obviously I2, U2 is big ticket, India, US, driving a new age identity together. All this is, Shweta, to counter China. So Indo-Pacific ambitions of China is getting all these new formations on the table, and we have to watch them with a lot of interest, how they really shape up.
And I'm sure Chinese officials will be watching them with a lot of interest.
As
Some
well.
of them who are here, and the Chinese premier who couldn't perhaps make
Incidentally,
it.
I don't know whether you know, but it's important to point out, Kartik, that today the Chinese premier, president who didn't come here, he is meeting two countries, very interesting, Zambia and Venezuela. And he's extending a very long rope in terms of debt to them.
That's
And Zambia
that's exactly
is
the
interesting.
challenge, right?
That-
the
so that
whole
meeting is
developing
happening
economy,
today.
Emerging economy bloc is dealing with debt restructuring, redevelopment of multinational development banks. I think the reforms are definitely needed there, because you have this multilateralism on one end of the spectrum, and you've got China's unilateralism on the other end.
Absolutely.
And this is a country which which doesn't have a free float when it comes to the currency. There's nothing stopping it from printing more and more yuan and trading them for dollar at a price which is not exactly a free float. So it is easy for China to fund emerging countries, other emerging countries outside of China itself, and lay out whatever terms and conditions which are beneficial to China. And we've seen the kind of debt that Ethiopia is facing, Ghana is facing, or the kind of debt trap that even a country like Nigeria is in right now. Leave alone what is happening in our subcontinent, leave alone what is happening with Pakistan or Sri Lanka, and our interests or disinterests in either of them. But I think this whole unilateralism of China versus, if I may stick my neck out and say, the ineffectiveness of multilateral development banks of the recent past have given China the edge. And that is something that the G20 countries would want to counter. So this reform of multilateral development banks, to my mind, is a very clear indication towards the G20 and our allegiance with US and whatever little influence that we have been able to build on US is to counter the unilateralism of China when it comes to influencing its economic power in the African region and in the Asian subcontinent.
And that perhaps is playing up also by the way of strengthening India-US ties. And